The city of Arendor stretched across the horizon like a river of glass and steel, reflecting the pale twin suns of the system. Hovering vehicles traced the streets below in neat patterns, while towering skyscrapers held governments, laboratories, and alien embassies. Among them, the human delegation had arrived with cautious optimism. Leora Vale adjusted the collar of her uniform as she stepped off the transport shuttle. She was tall, with dark hair pulled into a tidy braid, eyes sharp and observant. She had been chosen not just for her diplomatic skills, but because she carried with her a human trait many in the galaxy considered unpredictable: courage. The mission was clear: negotiate peace with the Cerelians, a species known across star systems for their intelligence, beauty, and aloofness. Humans had always considered themselves resilient, adaptable, and resourceful. But now they had to prove it to a race that measured worth not by action, but by mental complexity. The gates of the Cerelian embassy opened silently. Leora's team was guided through halls that shimmered with subtle light, walls that seemed to breathe, and floors that reflected not just movement, but thoughts, as though the very building watched them. The air was soft, scented faintly of something like jasmine and rain, but sharper alien. Finally, they entered the central chamber. It was circular, vast, and open to the sky above, which was a swirling pattern of color. The sunlight refracted into shapes that made the room feel like it existed between worlds. And there, at the center, stood Kale. Kale was everything the stories had promised. He was tall, taller than any human, with skin that shimmered faintly like moonlight on water. His eyes were deep and silver, reflecting every subtle movement. Every gesture was precise, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made it impossible to look away. "Welcome, human," Kale said, his voice smooth, but carrying an unusual tremor, almost like curiosity mixed with caution. Leora inclined her head politely. "Thank you for receiving us. We come in the interest of peace." Kale tilted his head, studying her as if trying to see beyond her uniform and badges into something deeper. "Peace," he repeated, almost to himself. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Why do you find me so beautiful, human?" The question struck Leora off guard. Not because it was strange, humans often asked about beauty, but because no Cerelian had ever admitted to noticing it in themselves, let alone asked why a human saw it. She paused, weighing her words carefully. "Because you are different. You move with purpose. Your presence feels alive. It's not just your appearance, it's the way you exist." For a moment, Kale did not speak. Then he let out a soft sigh, and his usual composed demeanor seemed to slip. "Alive," he whispered. The word lingered in the air, almost fragile, like a secret too dangerous to hold. The rest of the delegation shifted nervously. The Cerelians rarely allowed such intimacy in conversation. Leora felt the weight of every eye on her, every pair of silver eyes calculating her words, her intent. Yet, despite the pressure, she did not retract her statement. Kale's gaze lingered on her, not with the detachment of diplomacy, but with something closer to awe, or maybe fear. "Humans," he murmured. "You are unlike anything we have known." Leora tilted her head, curious. "In what way?" she asked. He hesitated. Then, carefully, he said, "You are unpredictable. You feel deeply, act without always calculating every outcome, and yet, your choices are often wiser than the logic you abandon. It is beautiful and terrifying." Leora felt a chill. Terrifying? She had met other species, dealt with negotiations where failure meant war. But to hear that humans themselves, her people, were seen as dangerous in such a subtle, profound way, it was humbling. Kale's expression softened. "I have seen many species," he continued. "They are orderly, perfect in their ways. Humans, you are not. You grow, you fail, you rise again. And yet, you are capable of inspiring things in us we have long forgotten. Things like what? Leora asked cautiously. Wonder, emotion, hope, courage. Kale's voice was almost a whisper now, as if admitting it aloud might break some unspoken rule. To see a human choose right, even when it is difficult, even when the cost is high, it stirs something dangerous inside me. And I am not alone. Others feel it too. Leora's heart pounded. She had expected negotiation, political games, perhaps subtle threats, but not this. Not a Cyrelian admitting that humans had power over them, not in the traditional sense of weapons or fleets, but in spirit. You honor us, she said softly, but we are not perfect. We make mistakes. Sometimes. Terrible ones. Kael nodded slowly. And yet, your mistakes often lead to brilliance. You adapt. You survive. You love. You create. All while we calculate, we control, we plan. But humans, you simply live. The silence that followed was thick, charged with something neither of them could name. The other delegates shifted, uncomfortable, sensing the rare intimacy of the moment. Leora, however, felt a strange confidence. For the first time, she realized that humans were not insignificant in the galaxy, not because of technology, weapons, or numbers, but because of what made them human. Spirit. Kael finally stepped back, regaining his composure. I must speak with the council, he said, voice smooth again, though a flicker of vulnerability lingered in his eyes. But, human, your presence. Leora inclined her head, unsure whether to be relieved or wary. I hope it is remembered well. As Kael disappeared through a portal of shifting light, one of the delegation whispered, Did he just confess admiration? Leora didn't answer. She only watched the place where he had stood, feeling the weight of his words settle in her mind. Humans were known for many things. Courage, resilience, ingenuity, but to be considered a living anomaly in the eyes of a species that measured existence in centuries of logic, it was a responsibility she had not anticipated. That night, Leora could not sleep. She walked through the city's observation deck, watching the twin suns sink below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and violet. In the distance, the Cyrilian embassy glimmered, serene and untouchable. She thought of Kael's words, of his awe, and of the unspoken truth they hinted at. Humans had power, not in weapons or fleets, but in something far older, far more profound. In that moment, she made a silent vow. Whatever came next in the negotiations, she would show the galaxy the full measure of humanity, not as conquerors, not as invaders, but as a species capable of wonder, courage, and brilliance beyond imagination. And somewhere in the halls of the Cyrilian embassy, Kael, too, pondered the human before him. Her presence lingered in his mind, like a song half-remembered, stirring thoughts he had thought lost. He did not understand why humans could evoke such raw, unstructured admiration, but he knew one thing for certain. This human, Leora Vale, was extraordinary. And extraordinary things, he realized, could change the course of history. The next day would begin the negotiations, and with it, the delicate dance of diplomacy. But both Kael and Leora knew that the undercurrent was already set in motion. A current of admiration, of awe, and of a dangerous, beautiful respect that could shift the balance of the galaxy. And so, humanity's story among the stars had quietly begun not with war, not with conquest, but with the undeniable power of the human spirit. The morning sun glimmered across the city of Arendor, casting long shadows between towering spires of glass and steel. Leora Vale arrived at the Cyrilian embassy again, her stride calm but her mind alive with curiosity. The previous day's encounter with Kael haunted her thoughts. A Sirelian, one of the galaxy's most intelligent beings, had openly admired humans not for their technology, but for the human spirit itself. Leora's heart quickened as she passed through the shimmering halls of the embassy. Her team whispered in hushed tones about Kael's unusual behavior. But Leora paid little attention. She had a feeling that understanding Kael, and, through him, the Sirelians would be crucial for the negotiations. At the central chamber, Kael waited. Unlike yesterday, there was no stiffness in his posture. He looked different, almost uneasy, yet determined. "Human," he said, inclining his head. "You return." "I never left," Leora replied with a small smile. "I came to understand." Kael's silver eyes studied her. "Understanding is rare," he said. "Humans seek knowledge, yes, but few truly seek to comprehend another being fully. You do." Leora's lips pressed into a thin line. She knew the truth in his words. Humans often judged based on survival, strategy, or instinct. But she wanted to know why humans evoked such emotion in the Sirelians. That question had followed her since the day she learned Kael felt awe, almost fear, at humanity. "I want to know," Leora said softly, "why we are different to you." Kael exhaled slowly. "It is difficult to explain. Perhaps you will not understand fully, but I will try." He gestured for her to follow, leading her through a hallway lined with floating orbs of light. Each orb contained a memory, a record of centuries of Sirelian history. The images shimmered and moved like water, displaying moments of triumph, invention, and careful calculation. Humans had never been part of these archives until now. At least, in Kael's personal observations. "The Sirelians value logic above all," Kael explained. "We plan, we calculate, we predict. We measure beauty in perfection, efficiency, and harmony. Humans, you are the opposite. You are unpredictable. You act without knowing the outcome. You fail, and yet you rise. You experience emotion, yet your decisions are not controlled by it entirely. And this," he paused, his voice quiet, "this inspires something in us we cannot fully understand." Leora frowned. "Inspires? You mean admiration?" "I, too." Kael shook his head slowly. "Not admiration alone. Fear, wonder, hope. Humans, you are alive in a way that challenges the way we understand existence. You are beautiful, not in form, but in spirit. And our species, we do not know how to deal with such a thing." Leora felt a strange warmth in her chest. She had expected negotiations to be about treaties, boundaries, and trade agreements. Instead, she found herself at the center of a revelation, a truth about humans that no one in the galaxy dared to speak aloud. Kael led her into a smaller chamber, a private room glowing softly with the pale colors of reflected light. He gestured for her to sit, and she did, keeping her posture straight. "You must know," Kael continued. "Humans are considered dangerous by some among my people, not because of your fleets or weapons, but because of what you represent. You are unpredictable. Your emotions, your creativity, your courage, they can disrupt centuries of careful order. To a Sirelian, that is perilous." Leora's brow furrowed. "Dangerous? We want peace. Surely that cannot be seen as dangerous." Kael's eyes met hers with intensity. "You misunderstand. Humans do not act like other species. You challenge assumptions, inspire ideas, and ignite courage. Where we plan centuries in advance, humans act in moments, and often, their actions change outcomes we believed fixed. You remind us that there is more than logic, more than control, more than order. The words settled heavily on Leora. She realized that the galaxy saw humans not just as newcomers or simple creatures. They were anomalies. Rare, unpredictable, and full of spirit. The human's ability to survive, adapt, and inspire could not be measured by the instruments or strategies of advanced civilizations. "Is that why you admired me yesterday?" Leora asked, a small smile tugging at her lips. Kale's lips curved faintly, a gesture so rare it seemed fragile. "Not just you," he said, "but you, human. Embody the essence of your kind. Courage, curiosity, and the will to act despite fear. You are alive. You remind me that perfection is not the only path. That life is more than calculation. That humans are extraordinary." Leora's chest tightened. She had known humans were resourceful and resilient, but to hear it reflected back from a Cerelian, a species that measured existence with logic and centuries of memory, was profound. "And you," she said softly, "you are afraid of us because we are unpredictable." Kale's eyes reflected the light of the room, glimmering like liquid silver. "Yes, and yet," he said, "there is more. There is respect, awe, and perhaps hope. Your people remind us of what we have lost. You are a mirror to a future we cannot yet imagine." Leora leaned back, letting his words sink in. Humans had always been underestimated. Planets, fleets, and even alien empires often dismissed humanity as fragile, chaotic, and unfit for the galaxy. And yet, here she was, witnessing a Cerelian, an apex of intelligence and beauty, admit that humans possessed something rare, something dangerous in its power. The human spirit. Kale shifted, studying her as if weighing every movement. "I have observed you since your arrival. Your delegation, your courage in speech, your adaptability in thought, your honesty. You challenge us. And I feel drawn to this. Drawn to what you represent. It is," his voice faltered slightly, "a truth many of us cannot acknowledge." "You mean," Leora said, leaning forward slightly, "humans are admired, even feared, for being alive in a way you cannot control?" KL nodded slowly. "Yes, that is the closest description. You carry a light that is unpredictable, yet undeniable. And it terrifies and inspires in equal measure." For the first time, Leora felt the full weight of humanity's place in the galaxy. Not as conquerors, not as warriors, but as a species whose unpredictability, courage, and spirit could reshape civilizations. Humans were not insignificant. They were catalysts. "I don't think people realize that," she said softly. "That we can inspire, challenge, and change minds. Simply by existing the way we do." Kale's gaze softened, a rare openness in his usually controlled demeanor. "Few humans understand it themselves," he admitted. "That is why you are extraordinary. You see, understand, and respect the weight of this difference." The room was silent for a long moment. The only sound, the soft hum of the embassy around them. Leora felt both the responsibility and the power of what KL had revealed. Humans were rare. And in the eyes of the galaxy, that rarity was dangerous, beautiful, and potentially transformative. KL finally spoke, voice low but firm. "Tomorrow, negotiations will begin. Your presence will affect them, more than you know. Humans have power, not in fleets, not in weapons, but in spirit. And I hope to witness how far that spirit can go." Leora nodded, understanding that this was more than diplomacy now. It was a moment to show the galaxy what humans could achieve not through force, but through courage, ingenuity, and heart. As she left the chamber, she felt a quiet determination settle within her. Humanity's journey among the stars was no longer a question of survival. It was a question of influence, inspiration, and proof that being human, unpredictable, emotional, courageous, was a force even the most advanced civilizations could not ignore. Outside, the twin suns of Arendor cast golden light over the city. Leora paused, looking toward the horizon, thinking of KL, and the revelation he had shared. The truth was clear. Humans were extraordinary. And in a galaxy that valued control and perfection, that very unpredictability was humanity's greatest strength. Somewhere inside the Cerealian archives, Kale recorded his observations once more. He wrote of humans, not as another species to be catalogued or analyzed, but as something rare, alive, and capable of inspiring wonder. He did not yet fully understand why humans could evoke such emotion. But he knew one thing with certainty. Humanity's presence in the galaxy would change everything. And as the suns dipped toward the horizon, a quiet promise lingered in the hearts of both human and Cerealian alike. The story of humans among the stars had only just begun. The city of Arendor shimmered in the early light of the twin suns. Today, the halls of the Cerealian embassy were alive with anticipation. Delegates from countless star systems gathered to witness the opening of negotiations. But beneath the polite greetings and careful bows, tension ran high. No species had ever dared challenge the Cerealians' authority, and humans were about to do just that. Leora Vale adjusted her uniform, taking a deep breath. She had spent the past day understanding Kale's confession. Humans were dangerous, not because of weapons or numbers, but because of spirit, courage, creativity, unpredictability, and that spirit, she knew, could turn the tide if wielded wisely. Kyle approached her, his usual composed presence softened by a flicker of anticipation. "The council awaits," he said quietly. His silver eyes, once distant, now seemed to carry a trace of hope. Leora nodded. She followed him through the floating corridors, past orbs that recorded centuries of Cerealian history. Each orb glimmered with precision and logic, reflecting a species built on order. But humans were about to remind them of something they had almost forgotten. The central chamber was vast, circular, and open to the sky. The delegates' voices quieted as Leora entered, human confidence evident in her posture and calm gaze. Kyle stood beside her, silent but supportive, his presence reassuring. "Welcome, delegates," Leora began. Her voice was steady, measured, and clear. "We come not to conquer, not to command, but to negotiate peace. And we do so knowing one truth. Humanity is alive. We act with courage, we adapt, we persevere, and we inspire. These are not weapons, yet they are powerful enough to shape the future." The chamber was silent. Delegates exchanged whispers, Cerealians among them included. No human had ever spoken with such clarity before a council known for cold calculation. And yet, something about her words lingered in the air, undeniable and challenging. Kale, observing from beside her, felt a subtle shift among the council. Humans were not soldiers. Humans did not rely on fleets or strategy alone. Humans relied on spirit, and that, he realized, was the very thing that could unsettle centuries of Cerealian logic. One of the senior Cerealian delegates stepped forward, voice smooth and controlled. "Human, you speak of qualities we do not understand. How can courage or adaptability resolve the conflicts of the galaxy?" Leora's gaze met his, unflinching. "Because these qualities are not just abstract concepts. They drive decisions. They inspire alliances. They spark creativity that no logic can predict. Humans survive not because we are perfect, but because we are unpredictable. And that unpredictability can turn failure into victory." The chamber murmured with soft astonishment. Kale noticed it first, how the other Cirellians leaned forward slightly, their silver eyes reflecting thought, curiosity, and perhaps admiration. Leora continued. Yesterday, I learned from Kale why humans are considered dangerous, not for what we build, but for what we embody. Spirit, courage, the willingness to act despite fear, to care despite uncertainty. And that is why we must be listened to. That is why we must be respected. A pause hung in the air. Then, without warning, alarms echoed through the chamber. Red lights flashed. Sensors detected movement outside. A fleet of rogue drones. A threat programmed to attack the embassy during the negotiations. Chaos erupted. Delegates shouted. Cirellians recalculated defensive measures. And humans instinctively assessed the situation. Leora's mind raced. She remembered Kale's words. Humans were unpredictable, capable of solutions no logic alone could provide. She glanced at Kale. We act. Kale's eyes widened. You want to engage? Yes, Leora said, her voice calm. In a way you do not expect. She moved swiftly through the chamber, issuing concise orders. Humans and Cirellians alike followed her lead. Where the Council relied on pre-programmed defenses, Leora improvised. She directed teams to create temporary barriers, using reflective panels and light amplification, a solution the Cirellians had never considered, blending their technology with human intuition. The drones advanced, but each move Leora orchestrated was unpredictable. Drones malfunctioned when sensors were tricked by light and reflection. Forces that relied on calculation failed because humans acted in ways machines could not predict. Kale watched in awe. Humans were improvising, adapting, and turning the tide in real time. Every action was deliberate, yet flexible. Where the Cirellians had seen threat, humans saw opportunity. Within minutes, the drones were neutralized, deactivated, without a single human casualty. The chamber erupted in astonished applause. Delegates turned toward Leora, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Kale's eyes reflected awe. He had never seen such raw adaptability, ingenuity, and courage. You see, Leora said, breathing slightly heavier but composed. We do not need overwhelming force to succeed. We rely on spirit, on courage, on the willingness to act when the outcome is uncertain. That is what makes humanity powerful. Kale stepped beside her, speaking to the Council for the first time. The human is correct, he said, his voice steady. Their unpredictability is not weakness, it is strength. Their courage, creativity, and spirit, these qualities inspire us, challenge us, and demonstrate a potential we have long ignored. Humans are not to be underestimated. Quote, a senior Cirellian delegate, his silver eyes reflecting deep thought, finally spoke. Perhaps we have misjudged your species. Leora nodded, sensing the shift. We are not invaders, we are not conquerors, but we are alive, and in the galaxy, life that acts, that perseveres, that inspires, that life is powerful. KL watched her, realizing that this was more than diplomacy. This was a revelation, a proof that humans, in their imperfection and unpredictability, could challenge the most advanced civilizations, not with fleets or weapons, but with spirit. The Council deliberated, and the results were clear. Humans would be respected, their voice considered in future decisions, their presence recognized as influential. No single action, weapon, or technology had won this outcome. It was courage, ingenuity, and human spirit that had prevailed. After the Council dispersed, Kale approached Leora. His usual composure was softened by something rare: admiration. Yes, but also gratitude. You have changed their perception, Kale said quietly. Not with force, but with life itself. Humanity's spirit is extraordinary, and I am honored to witness it. Leora smiled faintly. We all carry that spirit. Some of us just need the chance to show it. Kale's silver eyes lingered on her, as if trying to understand a force older than time. You remind me that perfection is not the measure of existence. Courage, resilience, adaptability, these are the true strengths of life. And humans, you embody them. Outside the embassy, the twin suns shone bright. Across the city, humans and aliens alike paused to observe the unusual calm that followed a day of crisis. Word would spread. Humans had proven themselves not through domination, but through ingenuity and spirit. They were a species to be respected, admired, and yes, slightly feared, but in a way that acknowledged their extraordinary potential. In the quiet of the observation deck, Leora looked out across Arendor. The horizon glimmered with possibilities. She thought of Kale's confession, the revelation of human uniqueness, and the Council's recognition. Humanity had triumphed not through war, not through numbers or power, but by embracing what made them human: unpredictability, courage, and heart. Kale joined her, silently observing the city below. Your people are remarkable, he said softly. I have witnessed many civilizations. Few could have achieved what you have today. And yet, it was not perfection that won the day. It was life itself. Leora's eyes sparkled with quiet pride. We are not perfect, she said, but we are alive. And being alive is enough to change the course of history. Kale nodded. For the first time, he felt hope not just for the Council, the negotiations, or his people, but for the galaxy itself. Humans had entered the stars not as conquerors, but as a reminder of what life could be. Courageous, unpredictable, and endlessly capable of inspiring greatness. And so, humanity's story among the stars had reached a pivotal moment. They had faced uncertainty, inspired change, and emerged triumphant not through dominance, but through the qualities that made them undeniably human. Leora and Kael stood together, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges and unknowns. But one truth was certain. Humans had arrived, and their spirit would not be ignored. The stars, once indifferent, now seemed to shimmer in acknowledgement of a new force: humanity. Alive and unstoppable, in ways no one could have predicted. The galaxy would remember this day. Not because humans had conquered, but because they had reminded every being, human and alien alike, of a simple truth. Life that acts, that persists, and that inspires is the most powerful force in the universe. And for Kael, and for Leora, and for all humanity, the journey had only just begun.